All right, today we're going to be working on a 2013 Cayenne S. Doing a quick brake job on it, just pads only, don't need the rotors, they're fine. So, first thing that we're going to do, this one happens to have the air suspension in it. So the air suspension button is right here. So you'll put it in the all the way down position. You want the car as low as possible so that you can jack it up. Once it's gotten all the way into the loading position, you hold the switch all the way forward for about 10 seconds, and then it will blink and tell you that it's in locked. Now the suspension will be at the lowest position possible, and then it will be locked. And when you try to jack it up, unfortunately we only have a floor jack and not a lift, which would be super duper awesome. But now when we jack it up, it won't try to compensate. The suspension won't try to readjust for compensation. So we'll start with that. Lug nuts are 3/4 inch. So we got the brake bar. Then of course in the trunk, underneath the lift up mat section, you'll find whichever is, if you have them, I'm assuming that you would have the factory Porsche locking lug nut. You would have the special lug nut adapter for those. So we're going to jack it up, get the tire pulled off, and then we'll take a look at the brakes. Second addendum to this, before we jack it up, on this one we're actually going to use, I like to use a little hockey puck on my jack. That gives it a little bit of squish and doesn't run the risk of scratching the car. And then underneath here, the jack points are right here. So there'll be 2 in the front and 2 in the rear. I position the hockey puck, and the jack sits right on here like this, nice and solid. Jack it up, and then of course jack stands for safety. So once you're into the brake caliper here, clean up your surface a little bit with a wire brush. These come out, these are your anti-chatter pins. I usually just take a little screwdriver and just gently go plink and pop these right on out. So screwdriver here, pull it out. When you put these back in, you got to make sure that they don't bend or you'll get a rattle in your brake. So I usually will put them in either before I put the pad or after, depending on the car. But make sure these have pressure on that brake pad, and you don't just bend this thing like crazy, because then it'll just rattle and drive you nuts. Right here are your triple square bolts. You need to have a triple square set to take these out. Porsche, Mercedes, BMW, or Audi will all use this triple square bolt right here. This right here is the wire that comes up here and plugs in with a little squeeze plug right here. You replace that every single time that you do a brake job. This will come down. This goes to a little Bakelite pickup that comes right through this right here and pushes onto your brake pad. It's meant so that when your brakes get low, the rotor will touch that and break that little Bakelite, thus causing an open circuit, and the light goes on in your dashboard. So these are kind of a one-use only thing. You'll see when we pull the pad out, you'll almost always break them. They're only $10. Just order them up and put new ones on anyways. There's no use in trying to reuse the old one anyways. So we'll pull off the anti-chatter, screwdriver here, pop and pop. Then we'll pull off the triple squares, break those free, and then we'll take a look at, we'll unplug this from here and just take it all out at the same time, so that you're not trying to fiddle around inside here with the screwdriver trying to get that little Bakelite piece out. There's a little, like a little copper retaining clip that you can pinch together with a little pair of needle nose pliers and pull it. But I just pull the whole thing off together and just pull the wire right out with the brake pad, feed it through here, and then don't worry about, reverse it when you put it back on. So you put the retainer clip or the sensor onto the brake pad, and then feed it through here, and then just plug it in rather than trying to get in here and put it on post getting the pad in place. So we'll get that moving and be back. All right, so making progress here. We pull the connector apart. Again, this will feed out. Just leave it attached to the brake pad. We're going to put in new pads. So here are the front and rears, and then you can just get here's the little part numbers for the little Bakelite components pieces that go on the pad that come apart when you get low on your brakes. These are only like $10. Again, there's like a single use. I would buy them. I've seen people cut this line and twist it together and stuff. Would absolutely not do that. Just get the parts, Porsche dealership, wherever you like to buy them. And next we'll be popping this guy out right here, and then removing the caliper from these two triple squares. All right, to get the, let me get that out of the way. To get the brake sensor wire off, it feeds up into this little holder right here. If you put a little screwdriver in right here or right here, just gently depress the little clip as any compression clip would work. This will then come sliding straight down and out. Like this, just, there she goes. And then this wire will just feed it through when we pull the brake out. I'm not trying to pull it off now, and I'll do this reverse when we put it on. I'll feed it through, put it onto the brake pad, feed it through the hole, which is big enough right here, and then bring it up and put it on. Don't try to put this on and then after the brake pad's installed, try to get it in there. It won't work. If you want to check the contacts or anything like that, this will now rotate 90 degrees and come out, and you can check contacts or replace if this has been rusted or broken. You can fix it, but it's a 90-degree rotation to get that out. So in 90-degree turn, and then it will lock in place, and that will go back in. Okay. Off comes the two triple squares. They're easy to get at because they face forward, which is extremely nice. And there's one, and then the second one will come out right here. Once that's out, we'll put something underneath it, like a little bucket or whatever we got handy, just to make sure that it doesn't fall and put stress on the lines. Right, so then you get your wire, and as shown here, it just pushes on these two little clips. We'll just hold it into place. It just pushes on and snaps on. Here's the old pad, which actually isn't done yet, but we're preemptively doing this. You can see that the fatter portion right here faces inwards going against the rotor, so make sure you don't put this on backwards. So skinny part this side, fat part on this side. Because this is what's going to break when your rotor when it gets down far enough. It's going to bust this little Bakelite piece, causing the open circuit that lets your light go on in your dashboard saying, brake problem, and then you go in way before this ever gets dangerous. So now that the pad has the wire on it, we'll feed that through the opening right here in the caliper. Like that. And then the pad will go into place, and we'll get that in place, and we'll put both of them in and return in just a second. But these eyelets right here, of course, will sit right on these little posts. Yeah, so the sensor line has got to go, the top one's got to go in here, and then be positioned properly. So it goes into that 90 degrees, like this, and then you spin it so it's positioned properly, so it can't push northwards. Then this connector will slide up through this holder and into it. So, yep, and a little more. And click. All right, now once you've got the connector up in there, the wire feeds right around the top of the bleeder, and put the little cap on. That just keeps it nice and looking good. And then down, and it feeds through that tiny little crack in the top of the rotor right there, and you just push it right in with your finger. Just push it right in. So once it's in place, and I like to pull this back and forth like you're flossing your teeth just a little bit, in and out, make sure that it's seated nice. That also helps feed it in when you're actually pushing it in. So don't take a screwdriver try to jam it in. Just pull this thing back and forth like you're flossing, and it'll go right in that little slide. And then it'll feed up, wraps around the top of the bleeder valve. Oops, off here right here. Right through here, so just that little cap wraps around, feeds up. Everything is snug and sitting the way that it should. Awesome. Bolts are tightened down. Double check your torque. Put back in the chatter pin. It goes in the same way that it came out. Just be sure not to bend this right here with your screwdriver too much, or again, your brake pads will rattle a little bit when you go down the road, and they'll drive you bonkers. I suppose you could try and put that in before you put the pads in, but I've always just done it this way. And then you just take your screwdriver or whatever and just gently go boink and pop that right back in there. That's what I've always done. Once you're all done, we're trying a couple different little techniques for the anti-chatter pin. We did decide that rather than trying to take a screwdriver or something like that and jam it up in here, we actually just took a little pair of needle nose pliers, put it into position, and then just flexed the tongue back a little bit, and it went twink and right in. As long as you have pressure here, make sure that these aren't loose and that neither of these have gotten bent, because if they're bent at all and you don't feel like it has, it's touching the pads and giving you a little bit of resistance, then your pad will chatter and you'll end up taking this off and pulling this out and bending it back again or getting a new one or whatever. So again, just a gentle flex here. Don't take a screwdriver and go wham and try to jam it in there or you'll bend it. Both of them are on, and then the tire is ready to go back on. All right, with that being said, now that we've seen how to do one, you should be able to just rinse and repeat on the remaining 3 tires. So of course, make sure that when you put the tire back on that you wiggle it back and forth, center it. Of course, the lug nuts are self-centering, but I always just, as I put them on and I do my star pattern to tighten them up, just make sure you wiggle the rim just a smidge, just to make sure that it centers in there perfectly. I will go back. The only difference is that on the rear brakes, the little Bakelite sensor that you pop on could have 2 prongs on it, inner and outer. The ones that I purchased have a singular, but you may have 2. Doesn't make much difference, but I'll do it right after this at the end. I'll do one quick addendum portion to show how you make sure that you have the right ones on the rear. So they will be just slightly different. So I'll come back to that and we'll be done. Congratulations on changing your own brake pads, not rotors, and saving yourself potentially a bunch of money. Of course, if the rotors look in any way, in my opinion, damaged, warped, rusty, anything like that, always replace them. The dealerships always will. This particular car had rotors done just several thousand miles ago, and they opted to not do the pads at the time. They wanted to get a little more wear out of them. So these rotors are well within spec and good to go. So thank you very much, and I'll give a little addendum at the end.